Another refill, hon? I asked, holding up the coffee pot. The businessman barely looked up from his laptop, just nodding while continuing to type. I topped off his cup, just like I'd done thousands of times before at Joe's diner. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be. 40 years of carrying plates will do that to you. But I still managed not to spill a drop. Small victories, right? Mom, please tell me you're not working tonight. David's voice came through my ancient flip phone during my break. My son, always worried about me. Just until 3, I said, counting my morning tips. Gotta keep busy somehow. He sighed that familiar sigh. You don't need to work anymore. I've told you. I know, sweetheart, but these old bones like to stay moving. I didn't mention that Patricia, his wife, had made it clear during Thanksgiving that a mother-in-law who still serves tables at her age was hardly the sort of family connection she wanted to advertise to her country club friends. Well, you're coming to dinner tonight, right? The car will pick you up at 4. I smiled, tucking a $5 bill into my apron pocket. I can drive myself, David. My Corolla still runs just fine. Mom, his tone was firm. Let me do this. Please? How could I refuse? This boy had been trying to take care of me since he was 10 years old, when his father walked out and left us with nothing but debt and broken promises. Okay, 4 o'clock. I glanced at my watch. Gotta go. Honorable Table 6 needs their check. See you tonight. And Mom, wear that blue dress I got you for your birthday. I hung up, wondering why the dress mattered. But David had always been particular about details. It's what made him such a successful investment banker. The rest of my shift passed in the usual blur of coffee refills, burger orders, and how's everything tasting folks. I'd been at Joe's so long, I could probably do the job in my sleep. At 3, I changed out of my uniform in the tiny employee bathroom, carefully applying the department store makeup Patricia had given me last party, with a card that read, "Every woman deserves to look her best." The blue dress fit perfectly. David always remembered my size, even though I saw him more in FaceTime calls than in person these days. The car that arrived wasn't the usual town car service David used. This was a sleek black Mercedes with a driver in a proper uniform. Mrs. Chen, he said, opening the door. Mr. David sent me personally. Something was definitely up. The drive to David's mansion in Greenwich took almost an hour. I remembered when he first bought it 5 years ago, how proud he was to show me every room. Patricia had redecorated twice since then, each time more extravagant than the last. Grandma, my granddaughter Sophie, flew down the steps as the car pulled up. At 16, she was the spitting image of David at that age. Same determined chin, same kind eyes. There's my girl. I hugged her tight, breathing in her expensive perfume. You've grown again. Mom. David appeared in the doorway, handsome in a tailored suit. You look beautiful. Patricia appeared behind him, perfect as always in designer clothes that probably cost more than I made in a year. Helen, she air-kissed my cheeks. That dress is quaint, but we really must take you shopping somewhere more upscale soon. The dress is perfect, David said firmly, giving his wife a look I couldn't quite interpret. Mom, come inside. There's something we need to discuss before the other guests arrive. Other guests? This was getting stranger by the minute. David's study was my favorite room in the house, the only one Patricia hadn't redecorated. Dark wood shelves lined with books, a worn leather sofa where I used to read to him as a child. And I stopped short. On his desk was an old shoebox I recognized instantly. You kept it, I whispered. David picked up the box carefully. Every receipt, every bank statement, every investment record from the past 30 years. Patricia frowned. Darling, are we really doing this now? The Carmichaels will be here any minute, and you know how they hate to be kept waiting. Yes, David said quietly. We're doing this now. He turned to me. Sit down, Mom. Please. I sank into the leather sofa, my legs suddenly weak. Sophie perched next to me, practically vibrating with excitement. Mom, David began, do you remember what you said to me the day Dad left? How could I forget? I said that sometimes the biggest dreams start with the smallest investments. He nodded, opening the box. I was 10 years old, watching you count out tips at the kitchen table. $67.43. And instead of using it for groceries or bills, you took me to the bank and opened my first investment account. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. She'd never heard this story. I'd made David promise not to tell anyone. Every week, he continued pulling out faded deposit slips. You put half your tips into that account. Never less than $30, even in the worst weeks, even when we barely had food in the fridge. David, I started, but he held up his hand. When I got into Harvard, he went on, everyone assumed I had a scholarship. But I didn't need one, did I, Mom? Because that tip money had grown into enough to pay my full tuition. Patricia's perfectly maintained eyebrows shot up. But you didn't stop there. David was on a roll now. When I started my first investment firm, you remortgaged your house to help with the seed money. When I nearly went bankrupt in '08, you sold your car and took the bus to work for 2 years to help keep me afloat. Any mother would have done the same, I mumbled. No, David's voice was fierce. Most mothers wouldn't work double shifts for 30 years, investing every spare penny in their child's future. Most mothers wouldn't live in the same tiny apartment, wear the same clothes, drive the same car for decades, all while quietly building an empire. Patricia's face had gone pale. Empire? What empire? David smiled, pulling out his phone. Sophie, show your grandmother her account balance. My granddaughter grinned, handing me her phone with a banking app open. The number on the screen made my coffee-worn hands shake. That's impossible. No, David said softly. That's compound interest. 40 years of careful investment managed by someone who learned everything he knows about money from watching his waitress mother count tips at the kitchen table. But, Patricia's voice was faint. Helen's just a waitress? David's tone was sharp. My mother is the majority shareholder in Chen Investment Group. Every dollar she invested in me has multiplied thousands of times over. She owns 40% of my company. She just never wanted anyone to know. The room spun slightly. David, I never wanted to be rich, to be acknowledged. I know, Mom, but tonight at dinner, in front of all our high society friends, I'm announcing the establishment of the Helen Chen Foundation for Working Parents. And its first board chairperson is going to be the smartest investor I've ever known, my mother. Through my tears, I saw Patricia sink into a chair, her world clearly tilted on its axis. And this was just the beginning of the dinner party. The Carmichaels arrived first, followed by a steady stream of Greenwich's elite. I recognized some of them from magazine covers and news articles about David's success. Patricia fluttered around, playing the perfect hostess, though her smile had a strained quality I'd never seen before. Mrs. Chen, a distinguished-looking man approached me. I'm Robert Walsh from Goldman Sachs. I've been trying to meet you for years, but your son always said you were unavailable. I smoothed my blue dress nervously. I usually am. The dinner rush waits for no one. He laughed, then realized I wasn't joking. You really do still work as a waitress, even with your net worth. Best way to stay grounded, I said simply. And I like making people smile, even if it's just over a good cup of coffee. More guests gathered around as word spread about who I was. The questions came rapid fire, about my investment strategy, about raising a financial prodigy, about why I'd kept my wealth secret. From across the room, I caught David watching me with a proud smile. Sophie stood beside him, recording everything on her phone. Mom, she'd said earlier this is going viral for sure. #secret millionaire waitress is totally trending tonight. Patricia appeared at my elbow with a glass of champagne. Helen, perhaps we should all move to the dining room. Her voice was honey-sweet, but I caught the tension underneath. This wasn't how she planned to spend the evening, watching her embarrassing mother-in-law become the center of attention. Of course, I said kindly, no need to rub it in. The food smells wonderful, dear. The dining room was a showcase of Patricia's expensive taste. Crystal glasses, fine china, and an enormous table dripping with ornaments that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But as we sat down, I noticed something different about the place settings. I touched the simple white plates at each place. From Joe's Diner, David finished. I bought them this morning. Tonight, we're eating off the same plates that helped build this fortune. Patricia's face went slightly green. Several guests exchanged glances, but Robert Walsh broke into a broad grin. Brilliant, he declared. Keeping it real, that's why Chen Investments outperforms everyone else. As the first course was served, David stood and clinked his glass. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you a story about my mother. I tried to wave him off, but he continued. When I was 12, I wanted to buy stock in a new company called Apple. Mom had saved about $2,000 in my investment account, serious money for us back then. The financial advisor at our local bank told her it was too risky, that a single mother should make safer choices. He paused, letting the memory settle. Mom thanked him politely, then walked across the street and opened an account at a different bank that would let her buy the stock. She told me something I've never forgotten. Sometimes the biggest risks look like the safest choices, and the safest choices are the biggest risks. Patricia shifted in her seat. She criticized my lack of sophistication about money for years. That $2,000 in Apple stock, David continued, it's worth over $4 million today. But more importantly, it taught me to trust my instincts, to look beyond conventional wisdom. Everything I know about investing, I learned from watching a waitress trust her gut. But surely, one of Patricia's friends interrupted, you've tried to get your mother to retire, to live more, appropriately for someone of her means. Before David could answer, I spoke up. Why would I retire from something I love? Every day, I get to make people's lives a little better, even if it's just with a warm smile and a hot cup of coffee. No amount of money can buy that kind of satisfaction. The table fell silent. Then Sophie stood up, raising her glass. To Grandma Helen, who taught us that true wealth isn't about what you have, but about what you give. To Helen, the table echoed, even Patricia, though she looked like she'd bitten into something sour. As dinner progressed, I watched my daughter-in-law struggle to process this new reality. The mother-in-law she'd been quietly ashamed of for years was actually wealthier than most of her society friends. During dessert, she finally cracked. But why? She burst out. Why keep serving tables when you could have lived like you? I finished gently. Patricia, honey, I grew up poor. Really poor. My parents worked themselves to death trying to give me a better life. When I had David, I promised myself two things: that he would have every opportunity I didn't, and that I would never forget where I came from. David reached over and squeezed my hand. Every time I serve a young mother struggling to afford breakfast for her kids, every time I see someone counting change to make sure they can leave a tip, I remember. And sometimes, just sometimes, their check mysteriously gets taken care of. That's worth more than all the country club memberships in the world. Patricia's eyes filled with tears, real ones, not the social kind she usually deployed. I've been horrible to you. No, I corrected her. You've been who you were raised to be, just like I have. Maybe now we can both learn something from each other. Robert Walsh cleared his throat. Mrs. Chen, would you consider joining our board of directors? We could use someone with your perspective. Before I could answer, David laughed. Get in line, Bob. Mom's already on the board of 3 major banks and 2 Fortune 500 companies. She just does all the meetings via phone between lunch and dinner shifts. The table erupted in amazed laughter. Even Patricia managed a genuine smile. Actually, I said, I'm thinking of cutting back to part-time at the diner. There's this foundation my son is starting that could use some hands-on leadership. Sophie squealed and hugged me. Does this mean you'll finally let me post about you on Instagram? One condition, I teased. You have to come work a shift with me at Joe's first. See how the other half lives. Deal, she said instantly. Mom, you should come too. Patricia opened her mouth to refuse, then paused. You know what? Maybe I should. Clearly, I have a lot to learn about what real success looks like. As the evening wound down, I looked around the table at these wealthy, powerful people eating off diner plates and listening to a waitress's wisdom, and I thought about all the twists life can take. Sometimes the richest moments come with the smallest price tag, and sometimes the best investments aren't the ones you can list on a balance sheet. The next morning, I showed up for my regular holiday day shift at Joe's Diner. Old habits die hard, and besides, holiday tips were always good. But this time, I had company. Mom, you're really going through with this. Patricia stood awkwardly in the diner's back room, staring at the spare uniform I'd brought her. Sophie was already changing into hers, excited despite the early hour. Consider it your first board meeting for the Helen Chen Foundation. I smiled, handing her a notepad and pen. We help working parents, right? Well, Let's see what they really need. Joe himself was working the grill just as he had every holiday for 30 years. He'd been there on my first day, taught me everything I knew about the service industry. When he saw my entourage, he nearly dropped his spatula. Helen, is that your daughter-in-law? The one beau. Yes, I cut him off before he could repeat some of Patricia's less flattering comments from previous visits. She and Sophie are training today. The breakfast rush was steady. People who had nowhere else to go on holiday morning, workers heading to their own shifts, families grabbing a cheap meal before expensive celebrations later. Patricia watched me work with new eyes, noticing how I remembered every regular's order, every dietary restriction, every little detail that made them feel seen. Mrs. C, a young woman, walked in with 2 small children. Jenny, a single mom working 3 jobs to make ends meet. Happy holidays. Happy party, honey. I hugged her. Your usual booth is ready. Patricia followed me as I got them settled. You know all your customers this well. They're not customers, I corrected. They're family. Jenny here is putting herself through nursing school. I winked at the kids. Hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, right? As I walked away, I heard Patricia asking Jenny about nursing school, childcare costs, the challenges of balancing work and study. Maybe she was finally getting it. Sophie turned out to be a natural, charming customer with her genuine enthusiasm and quick smile. By mid-morning, she earned more in tips than Patricia had made all day. Grandma, she pulled me aside during a lull. That man in booth 3, he's counting pennies for his kids' pancakes. I glanced over. A father and son, both in worn clothes, the boy staring longingly at the party decorations. Handle it, I told her. Trust your instincts. Sophie nodded, marched to the register, and paid their bill herself. Then she asked Joe to make up a special holiday pancake with whipped cream and sprinkles. On the house. The father's eyes welled up with tears. Thank you, he whispered. It's been a rough year. Sometimes, Sophie told him, using my own words, the smallest kindness can make the biggest difference. Patricia watched the exchange, absently rubbing her aching feet. I never understood before, she admitted, why you kept working here when you didn't need to. But it's not about the money, is it? Never was, I agreed. Money's just a tool. What matters is how you use it to touch lives. By the time we closed at 2, Patricia had learned more than just how to carry plates without dropping them. She'd learned names, stories, dreams. She'd seen how many people struggled to leave even small tips, how a kind word could brighten a hard day, how community happens in the most unexpected places. Mom, she said as we hung up our aprons, and I noticed it was the first time she'd ever called me that instead of Helen, I'd like to make Joe's Diner the first official partner of the foundation. We could set up a scholarship fund for employees and regulars. Like Jenny, I hugged her, feeling decades of tension melt away. Welcome to the family business. The real family business, Sophie added. Not the investment firm, the business of investing in people. As we left the diner, I saw David waiting outside with the car. He took one look at his exhausted wife and daughter in waitress uniforms and broke into a huge grin. He said, hugging us all. Learn anything? Patricia kissed his cheek. Only that your mother is the richest woman I know, and it has nothing to do with her bank account. Finally figured that out, did you? He laughed. Only took you 15 years. We drove home together, 3 generations forever changed by one holiday shift at a small diner. Sometimes the best gifts can't be wrapped, and the greatest wealth isn't counted in dollars and cents. It's measured in lives touched, hopes restored, and bridges built between worlds that only seem far apart.